So this is to give you an idea of what's going on in Chittenden County in terms of rental housing. These are numbers of production over the last bunch of years. We have had much more production since about 2012 than historical average. Historical average used to be about 200 units a year. We've been doing double that most years over the last several years. 2015, 2016 were huge years, 534, 689 units. Well, that's a ton of new housing, not as much of it in Burlington proper as the rest of the county. Most of the new housing that's being built is in suburban Chittenden County. Burlington has about 50% of the county's share of rental housing, but we haven't really been keeping up with our share in recent history in terms of new production. The total over this period of time, we've only produced about 18% of the new housing in Burlington compared to other places in the county. It's easier to build in the suburbs. There's land, wide open spaces where it's a heck of a lot easier and cheaper. And that's why very few developers are crazy enough to build in Burlington. There's also a couple of big projects that account for some of those bigger number years in Burlington. There was the redevelopment of the old DMV site up on North Avenue in the new North End, the Thayer Commons project. That came online between 2 years, a huge number of new units. And then SD Ireland, Scott Ireland's taken on what he calls the Bayberry Commons project, which is the old concrete quarry and plant, which is on Grove Street in Burlington, but really feels almost more like a South Burlington location than a Burlington location, and that's a ton of new units as well. So this is where I start showing you how the numbers work. So in Burlington, 15% of all new units have to be affordable to households at or below 65% of area median income. And so what does that mean? Well, that means a one-bedroom renting for about $1,000 a month and a two-bedroom renting for about $1,100 a month. So this is what the numbers look like when you try to do that. So this is your rental income for a one-bedroom apartment. That's on an annual basis. It costs you about $500 a month to operate that apartment. So that's this $6,000 here. So your net operating income, and that's before you pay any debt service. That's not cash flow. That's before I pay the bank. The net operating income is about $6,000 on that inclusionary unit. A really aggressive capitalization rate, cap rates are used to project value of real estate. It's how an appraiser and a bank analyze a real estate project and the value of that project. If I take that $6,000 net operating income at that 6.6% aggressive cap rate, that apartment is only worth about $92,000, but it costs easily $225,000. Nancy showed you numbers of $250,000. It can easily be $300,000. The point is, you are underwater severely building that inclusionary unit. So the theory is that we're making so much money on the market rate stuff that we have to be able to absorb this, right? Well, let's see how that works. At 80% of area median income, so this is a little bit higher rent. This is $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. That apartment is worth $134,000, so I'm still underwater at about $90,000. So what if I bring it all the way up to 100%? Now I'm charging $1,500 for a one-bedroom apartment. I mean, some people don't even believe that anybody would pay that much for a one-bedroom apartment, but let's say they would. That apartment's worth $190,000, so I'm still underwater. So what if I take it up to 120% of area median income? So this is an $1,856 one-bedroom apartment. I mean, that's most than most people's mortgages, right? That is now worth enough that my value is finally greater than my cost. But I'm not getting $1,856 for my new one-bedroom apartments in the buildings that we've been building in Burlington. So you can see the challenge here. It's really, really difficult to try to pull this stuff off. Some other ways to look at it. This is average development cost of a 30-unit project. So I took $225,000 a unit, 30 units, $6.75 million. This is the rental income, and that income is based on having 15% inclusionary in my project. My total net operating income is $333,000 a year. So if I calculate the return on cost, which is return on cost and cap rate are effectively the same thing. My return on cost is 4.93%. So my return is less than the rate that an appraiser or a lender would use to calculate the value of the project. So this project is completely underwater. So how the heck have we been building anything, right? The reality is sometimes we get lucky and we find a site where we can build for $200,000 a unit, or maybe even a little bit less than that. So that's part of the story. The other part of the story is we've been able to piece together creative financing, working with conventional mortgage lenders, the Vermont Community Loan Fund, CCRPC. VITA has a brownfield loan program that funnels EPA money into projects like the projects that we've been doing. So we just get clever with how we put the money together. But everything about this is working against us. And it's getting harder, not easier. Construction costs are going up, not down. Interest rates are going up. I'm sure everybody's seen the economic news. 10-year treasuries are up, significantly over the last 60 days or so. I wish I had good news to deliver, but the reality is I think we're going to see a lot less new rental housing development in Chittenden County in the next 10 years than what we've seen in the last 10 years.
So this slide looks at the single-family home sales for 2017. And average sales price, you can't really read this, but it's right around $300,000 for an average single-family home built in Chittenden County. For new construction in Chittenden County, so what I did is I pulled data for condos and single-family homes built in Chittenden County. The average price was $410,000. That's far from affordable. The average days on the market, this is interesting, is 241. What that tells me is that developers are willing to wait, okay? They'll put up more expensive product and they'll wait to sell them. A lot of this is they have to wait. As a single family home builder, if we could build stuff for $260 or sell it for $260 and $270, we do it all day long because we'd be selling them all day long. So if you go to my next slide, we can get into some of the costs. So what I did is I pulled a national average. Now the closest data I could get was from 2011, okay? And this was for a 2,300 square foot house on roughly, what is that, probably a little under half an acre of land. Total sales price was right around $310,000. This is a house we're building in Chittenden County in South Burlington in the southeast quadrant, neighborhood called Meadows, mixed-use neighborhood. It's a 2,300 square foot house. Lot size is smaller, but we see a couple big differences here versus the national average. And I got to tell you, it's really hard to have an apples-to-apples comparison. This is just a snapshot idea of what the differences are with what we're building in Vermont versus what the national average would be. So I just want to put that as a caveat. Construction cost, we're over $100,000 more on average to build a home in Vermont. Now this is a nice house. It's got granite, it's got air conditioning, it's got hardwood floors, it has tile, it's got tiled shower. So you could back a lot of that out, and you'd be under 400, but there's still a pretty big discrepancy. I was talking with our panel on email, and Eric brought up a couple good points as far as why construction is so much more, and I agree 100%. The biggest one in my mind is that we have to build homes in Vermont at such a robust level, because if you think about our temperatures that we're dealing with here, we just had 20 below temperatures, and then in August we'll be dealing with 95-degree temps and high humidity. The homes that we build have to have an energy rating that are super high, an insulation level that's higher than anything else, super robust heating and cooling systems. And I'll tell you, when I got into this business 15 years ago, nobody cared about central AC. It's changed. I mean, our climate's different, and people's tastes are different. So air conditioning is becoming a must, which we didn't have that 10 or 15 years ago. The other thing I want to point out is the lot cost is going to be a lot higher for new construction. I think it was cut off on this sheet, but it's probably in the $130,000, $140,000 level. That takes into account land cost and total construction cost, which includes permitting. So all the roads, all the infrastructure that we have to put in is much higher for our area. And you can go to the next slide. Couple things. First of all, again, if I had a magic bullet, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be writing contracts and selling houses. So, but a couple ideas. Amy got into this a little bit with increasing density, or Nancy did. Increasing density helps a tremendous amount. A simple something that I showed here, if you double the density, you obviously cut in half your development costs for infrastructure. So that's one idea. It won't help with land costs because landowners are savvy these days, and they're going to say, if you can get 30 units, you pay me X amount, but anything above and beyond that you get permits for, you're going to pay me X amount more. So that doesn't help on the land side of thing. Tax stabilization programs. These are happening. They might be happening in your municipality. These are a great program that can allow developers to offset some of their costs for the initial development phase. This is an example of a town in central Vermont where they have a slow paid, so if you pay a percentage as your development comes online, because the first couple years of whether it's single family home or multifamily construction, you have a time that you're selling homes, and the first couple years are the slowest because it's hard to sell a home in a construction zone. So a lot of buyers will wait until they're built up. So just help controlling our costs. Well, that will help too. One thought I've had is that on town-owned land, if there's a way that municipalities can somehow come together and figure out land that they own, that they can pair up with a developer and say, listen, you can have this land for X amount, which would be much less than the retail amount, but there's a caveat there. You've got to build a certain number of homes at a certain affordability level. And if you look at the numbers that we're presenting, if you can reduce that land cost and infrastructure cost, there was a great idea brought up about having towns and cities help with infrastructure costs. That's a big one as well. I'm going through a development process right now, and the town's evaluating how many roads we need to build. Err on less roads. It's better for the environment. It's better for our costs, and it's better for the home buyer. Next slide. So this is a part of a project, the same neighborhood that $510,000 home example was in. This is Meadows in South Burlington. This is a good example of high-density housing, but single-family housing. Okay, so it's 7 units per acre. We call these our cottages. We sold them really fast because we were in a really strong price point for single-family homes, mid 300,000s. You got a full basement. You got anywhere between 2 and 3 bedrooms. You got hardwood. You got tile. You got air conditioning. You didn't have an attached garage, but you had a carport. So this housing isn't for everybody, but there was a real select buyer that really liked this idea. And I got to tell you, from a developer standpoint, single-family home buyers are looking for smaller houses. The days of, thankfully, the McMansions are done. That can only help with our average sales price numbers. Go to the next one. I was going to get a really cool drone shot of this neighborhood, but I got cocky with the drone, and I took it off beginner mode, and I crashed it in one of these snowbanks, and it was my son, so I kind of freaked out. So I just went old school and took one with my phone. So this is Village Haven in Essex Junction. This is 24 units. You can see our sales prices. This was back in 2011. This is a really cool example because it was part of the Vermont Neighborhoods program. I think it's still around. Great program. If you're from a municipality, check to see if you qualify for it. Check to see what areas qualify for it, because this allowed us to skip back 250. We came online a lot quicker. Our development costs were a lot lower. We introduced homes, smaller homes, slab on grade, which saves some costs as well. And this was a program that we had 2 homes that were in the Champlain Housing Trust program, which is their home equity sharing program, which was an awesome program. I can't speak highly enough about it. Just know that it's a resource out there. It's a finite resource. CHT doesn't have an endless supply of money to be able to offer this. But basically what we did from a developer's side, we sold the house to CHT. CHT then gave a grant to the home buyer, and they sold the house to the home buyer. So we got what costs we needed covered, and so did CHT, and the home buyer got a reduced cost. So it was affordable action, or housing in action. I think that's it. Yeah. And just anecdotally, I've been in this for, like I said, 15 years or so. Just the fact we're here having this discussion is huge. When I started, there was from my father's generation, it was very adversarial, towns and developers. It was just a constant fight. It's not that way anymore, and we're heading in a really good direction. Towns will come to us and say, we want this type of housing, here's where we want it, here's what we can give you. What can we do? So it's been, I think there's a good shift, a paradigm shift happening, and it's encouraging.